every animal that comes under my care comes to me because they need to teach me something. For years, Hugh and I adopted, fostered, transported a lot of rescue dogs. And a lot of times we would get a call out of the blue with a dog that was in need of help. Being a veterinarian, I usually got the cases that were the difficult ones or came with all kinds of medical issues. Certainly every rescue gets dogs in that have medical issues, but a lot of them landed at our house. I don't remember where the call came in from about Myra. It may have been a call directly to my veterinary clinic. We had been doing a lot of work with English Toy Spaniels and Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, and my New Year's resolution was that we were going to branch out and do rescue work with breeds other than Cavaliers. So what's the first phone call I get the first week of January? A Cavachon. What is a Cavachon? A Cavachon is a Cavalier Bichon. And I said, well, that's branching out. It's not all Cavalier. And so I said, absolutely, we would be willing to take in this little Cavachon. So the owner brought her to my clinic, and when I saw her, I wanted to cry. The owner loved her dearly, and she was very sad to be giving up Myra, but she knew that it was the best decision. Myra had bright red, very thickened, cracked, oozing, infected skin. She was missing a lot of her hair. Her ears were infected, and she was a sad little thing. And I just felt sorry for her. And then the owner started telling me her story. She had bought Myra at a pet store, which we all know that's probably, no, absolutely is not the place to go buy a pet. But she didn't know. And so she bought Myra as a puppy, and she was a single woman, and she and Myra were very bonded and spent all their time together. Then she got married. And then she had a baby, and then her husband got a husky puppy. The husky did not like Myra. Myra was afraid of the baby, and the husband did not like Myra. So Myra spent all of her time hiding in a crate in the bedroom. And the owner knew that Myra wasn't happy, and she decided to look for a new home. Her parting words to me, she gave me some of Myra's kibble, and she gave me a bag with some leftover antibiotics, her veterinary records, some antimicrobial shampoos, and she said, none of this stuff works, but here's what I have. And then I looked at the veterinary records, and unfortunately, the owner couldn't afford to keep taking her back to the veterinarian. And a lot of times what she would do is she would split the antibiotics. So she'd use them for a few days. Myra would look a little better, and she would stop, and she would save the rest for the next time her skin smelled really bad. So that's really not a good way to use antibiotics. We build antibiotic resistance, and we never get the problem solved. Not that that was going to solve her problem anyway. And her parting words to me when she left, and she was teary-eyed and she was sad to be leaving Myra behind, but her parting words were, oh, and she pees on the floor for spite. And I said, oh. And so I wished her well and told her I would take good care of Myra, because it's not my job to judge someone else's ability to care for their dog. And she, in my opinion, was doing what was right. She couldn't supply what Myra needed. She knew Myra was unhappy, and this would be a better place for her to be. But what became crystal clear to me was Myra peed on the floor one time too many, and the husband didn't like the dog anyway and said, this dog has to go. And bless this woman for turning her over to a rescue rather than taking her to the shelter, because she was not going to be easily adopted with clearly a lot of medical issues. So my first goal with Myra, other than to try to give her a lot of love, because she was very sad, was very bonded to this person. It took 4 months for Myra to find her voice. She never barked. I never heard her talk until 4 months after we had her. And I'll get to that part of her story. So my goal with Myra, one, was to throw the kibble away because I knew that was doing her no good. It was a low quality kibble with a lot of corn and fillers and synthetic vitamins and minerals, and clearly was not working for her skin. I threw away the shampoo because it was loaded with chemicals, and I threw away the antibiotics because that wasn't going to solve Myra's problem. So I started with designing a diet for Myra that I thought would be a rather novel protein that would be whole foods and not have any synthetics in it, and that would start helping her to heal her skin. So I designed a diet, and I decided that I would start bathing her every other day and scrubbing the crusts off her body. She just had horrible, oozing, crusty skin. This is before I knew about TheraClean. If I'd had a TheraClean available at that time, she definitely would have been there. And the other thing that I did is I took her to my clinic and I did complete lab work on her and x-rays. And lo and behold, Myra had bladder stones. Well, of course she was urinating on the floor. She had bladder stones. She had a bladder infection. She couldn't help it. So we did surgery to take her stones out. They were oxalate stones, which are very difficult to dissolve. But I knew I could remove them. She would heal quickly from surgery, and then we could design her diet around that issue as well. So Myra was on a home-cooked pork-based diet for probably the first 2 months, and she was healing very, very quickly. But I wasn't getting quite as far as I wanted to be with that, so I switched her to a rabbit-based diet, which I knew would be a very novel protein for her. It's an expensive protein. It's not something that she ever would have been exposed to by her owner. And once I did that and stripped the diet down a little bit more, she healed even faster. So bathing with non-chemical shampoos, feeding her a really good diet, getting synthetics out of her diet, getting rid of those bladder stones that were so painful. Her urinary tract infection cleared up with no trouble. Within 6 months, Myra had a beautiful full coat. Just gorgeous. Her skin was healed. There was no more scratching. She didn't have ear infections. She wasn't miserable. She wasn't hiding. She was starting to play with our other dogs. And at that time, we were traveling to a lot of dog events. And we decided that we would include Myra in the group of dogs that traveled with us. So we always took George and we always took Pookie. Sometimes we would take another one, but it was always George and Pookie because they were so good at these large events with thousands of people and barking dogs and craziness going on. And they just didn't care. And Myra seemed pretty mellow. So I thought, well, let's give this a try. We drove to Virginia, and Myra was at the event all weekend, and we discovered that weekend, as other animals were playing with things, that she loved squeaky toys. So we took Myra for a walk through the venue, and there were 100 vendors. There were a lot of vendors, and we literally went into every single booth, took squeaky toys off all the racks, and we would squeak them, and Myra got to pick out the ones that really attracted her. She had a certain pitch that she liked, and so we bought her a whole bunch of these squeaky toys and took them back to our booth, and she just sat there playing with her squeaky toys and having a really good time. But we still had never heard Myra bark. And as the event was over at the end of the weekend, we packed all of our dogs into the car and truck, and we had discovered that Myra, the dogs were crated in the truck, and we discovered that Myra liked to be able to see out the windows. So her crate was sitting up on top of a stack of whatever. And as we're pulling out of the venue, the petting zoo was packing up, and they had goats and sheep and chickens and things running around. And all of a sudden from the back seat, we heard a bark that we had never heard. We knew it wasn't George. We knew it wasn't Pookie. And I turned around and said, Myra found her bark. So 6 months into having Myra, we had cured all of her skin infections. We had cured her bladder infection. We had cured her ear infections. She had found her bark, and she found her joy in her squeaky toys. that is the joy that I wish for every pet owner that has an animal with chronic problems that they're not able to solve, allergies that seem insurmountable. This was back at a time when we weren't talking about the microbiome. We weren't talking about leaky gut. Did I have her on a probiotic? Yes, just because I knew that we needed to replace everything that she had lost with all of the antibiotics and the chemical shampoos and everything. So we were able to do that just by using common sense and looking at what does Myra need and listening to what her body was telling us. She was one of my biggest success stories, and I'll never look back. And so that's why I say when you have an animal that is suffering with chronic allergies, whether they are I tested her for environmental allergies. Yes, she had some. Did they ever cause us a problem again? No. I tested her for food allergies, but it really didn't matter because once I got her on a novel diet, she was cured. Now, on her test, it said she was allergic to chicken. A year later, I gave Myra homemade chicken meals. No problems. She wasn't allergic to chicken itself. She was intolerant of highly processed, poor quality chicken with grains added in, synthetic vitamins added in, and it just piled on to her problems. She had things environmentally that were bothering her. She had foods that weren't agreeing with her. And then she was getting treatment that was not solving her problems. So Myra was wonderful. Sadly, we did lose Myra to a very aggressive cancer. That's a story for another time. But she taught me a lot. And I have always said that every animal that comes under my care comes to me because they need to teach me something. Myra taught me a lot. She taught me about food therapy for allergies, healing the gut, healing the skin. She taught me about the trauma and the sadness that a pet goes through when their bond is broken with the person that means so much to them, and how long it took her to be able to heal and find her joy. And once she found that joy, she was probably one of the most joyful dogs we have ever had. She was playful, she was outgoing, she was amazing. And so for everybody who's in the rescue world, don't give up hope. These dogs, yes, they go through a grieving process. I think even the ones that we've gotten from puppy mills still go through a grieving process and an insecurity because they're in a new environment. And if they've been in a puppy mill in a cage, you put them outside and it's scary. They don't know what grass is. They don't know what these things are falling out of the sky off of trees. They don't know what those loud noises are. They don't know what all the beeps and things are that are going on in your house. So give them grace, give them time, and they will come around and they will learn to love it. Some take longer than others. But I'm very thankful for all the people that do rescue work, and I'm very thankful for all of our rescue pets who have taught us so much, particularly Myra. She was very, very special.